in terms of the co-option of certain ideals, definitely to expand US hegemony. I mean, we see the US administration lecturing the global South, China and Russia about human rights, democracy, and freedom. And this is one of their major pillars of how they justify their foreign policy. Could you speak to the US's own track record on these issues, both internationally and domestically, in terms of human rights, democracy, freedom? In your opinion, what moral standing does the US have on this issue?
I mean, the United States has no moral standing. The United States has no model for anything that even resembles a democracy that centers the people. It has no model for actual freedoms. There are folks who have freedoms in this country, and that's 1% of the population. The 99% does not have freedoms. You know, we have a democracy that tells us that we could go vote every 4 years and choose the person that is going to exploit us for the next 4 years. But it's not a democracy that guarantees housing, education, and access to healthcare. It's not a democracy that guarantees that our children will be able to walk these streets without getting shot by a racist cop. It's not a democracy that guarantees that our children will be able to exist without the threat of being swamped into the mass incarceration system. We are the one country in the world that incarcerates the majority of people. Like, it's insane. And so to speak about democracy in a country where laws are utilized against Black, brown, indigenous, poor white people, which is the majority of people in this country. I mean, today we are fighting for the state of Missouri not to execute a Black man because ultimately, legally, there's no real evidence that links him to a crime. And this has been happening multiple times. There was a man that was executed yesterday. And you go in history, the lynchings have taken different methods. It has changed in terms of methods, but people are continuously lynched in this country. Slavery was eradicated, but there's the 13th Amendment that continues to enslave Black and brown bodies in the prison system. And so we have no moral authority as a nation to police or surveil any other nation in the development of their own projects as nations. But yet the tortures that we know human beings experience in Guantanamo Bay should be shut down and given back to the people of Cuba because it's a Cuban territory. But yet we still have that torture center not far from our country. People talk about 9/11, which commemorations just recently happened. But what happened with 9/11 was years, decades of exterminating people in the Middle East. We're talking about 4.5 million deaths, the destruction of economies, the destruction of infrastructure. And so that is what the United States has done. My family comes from the Dominican Republic. My parents were born, raised there, and were forced to migrate because of the many political and military interventions of the United States in the Dominican Republic in 1965. 80,000 US Marines invaded my country and imposed a level of destruction that did not allow many people to stay in the country. That's why we saw large migrations in the 80s. And so I think it's important for us to understand that the United States and its brutal force laid across this world has done enough damage to force the levels of migration that we're seeing in this country now, because we have Harris and Trump, both Democrats and Republicans, scapegoating migrants and talking about migrants as if people wake up one day and decide to cross the borders just because they're bored. No, it's the level of destruction that the United States has caused. US imperialism has been one of the most essential reasons for the climate catastrophe that we're experiencing today. The US military is one of the biggest polluters on earth. And so the levels of crimes against humanity and the planet, I think, are immeasurable. I mean, we can't put that in a piece of paper. We would need years to be able to even create papers to put into all the atrocities that the US empire has caused across the world.